Hey, how are you doing? This is another video in my Mind's Eye Theatre series of videos, and this is about setting up and organising a vampire live action role-playing game. Mind's Eye Theatre, set of rules, other rules are available. Mind's Eye Theatre, One World by Night, wherever it's called these days, is a pretty good set of rules. And the reason why I'm doing these videos is A, I've got a load of experience doing this. I thought it'd be really good to share that experience. But B, as we come out of lockdown, people are wanting to get together and connect in different ways. And Vampire seems to be going quite well at the moment. It's not as big as it was in the 90s, but it seems to be doing all right. And I think there could be an appetite out there for people to reconnect with games, get games going. So that's what these videos are about. So maybe you are inspired to want to set up and run a Mind's Eye Theatre game. So this is my top tips. I've got a wee piece of paper to keep me on track so I don't get distracted. Often a problem. One thing about here is if you want to start a game from scratch, as opposed to go in and start running a game. I've got some other thoughts on being an ST and handovers and stuff in other videos. So if you like what you see here and you think it's valuable advice, do like and subscribe, especially to this playlist, because there'll be much more of this coming up. So first up, if you want to set up a vampire game, think about if you're the best person to run or storytell it, because it's going to take commitment. Okay, as your game grows, you're going to spend more and more time dealing with players. You think if you have 20 players and it's going to maybe take you 15-20 minutes a player to deal with downtimes and stuff, that's a lot of commitment between games. With that in mind, think about your pacing of the game as well. Monthly seems to work okay. That seems to be the sweet spot for storytellers, not burning themselves out too much. The other thing that, people might not want to hear this, running a vampire game, running any sort of game organisation takes a bit of sort of charisma and people skills to pull people together. If you're starting this game from scratch, you're going to have to be the person that's going to go out there and network, pull people together. That's a completely different skill set to being a storyteller. Maybe you've got them both, but have a think about that. Have a think about other people you can work with. And organisation, it's going to take some level of organisation. You're going to have to be on the ball with stuff. You're going to be doing promoting. You're going to be your own best fan to push yourself forward when things seem to be getting a bit tough. So I guess what I'm saying is maybe you've got an idea to run or set up a game. It doesn't have to be you who storytells, and vice versa. You could be a great fit for storyteller, but you might not be the organizer. Get yourself a first follower, somebody to help you with that. And actually, first follower for any organisation or any sort of organisation or set of games is probably more valuable than the leader themselves. Next one, how are you going to get new players? Maybe you're part of a tabletop group, and if that tabletop group is quite large, 4, 5, 6 players, that becomes a good springboard to jump from. And if they've got friends, you might connect with other players, Facebook. I would give yourself a good couple of months to promote and get players bought in before you actually go into running your first game. As much promotion as you can. Certainly back in the day when I did Vampire, posters everywhere. Loads of places, all the role-playing game shops will put posters up, libraries, pubs, anywhere we could think of. And that was really before kind of social media became. So yeah, get out there. How are you going to get new players? It's okay to start with fewer players than you'd like. I think the sweet spot for any sort of game is kind of 15 plus. That way you start getting the internal plot working without you having to do too much to take away from player agency. Now there's a couple of different styles of games here that you might want to think about. First one is kind of like your normal game, which is kind of your friends, maybe running in a city. An example of that would be the Glasgow Vampire LARP, GV LARP. that runs itself. It has its own group, troop. I think I've heard them described as troop games before. It's relatively easy to set up, and it does take a bit of effort to keep running. I'll talk about that in another video. Second one, maybe as part of an organisation. Now, I'm not sure how many big organisations still exist anymore. Certainly in the UK, there was a Camarilla UK, there was a group down south, Masquerade UK, and there was a Daughters of Twilight group. So maybe you're lucky enough to have a local game or been to a local game, and you want to take that to your own hometown. The advantage of that is the players are networked, so player characters can actually come and visit, and that's going to help you generate a few player numbers, help you get critical mass to get started. Certainly, I set off at Huddersfield University Park Camarilla UK. When I moved back to Darlington, I set up Darlington Games as part of Camarilla UK, and Travelling Players certainly helped me establish myself as a domain. And finally, you might want to run a few one-offs, sort of like org games, or so when I was in Darlington, certainly I went up to Sunderland University for one of their big one-off games. It takes a bit of planning and organisation, set up the plot for the night, but that could be a good way to kind of run a one-shot and see what hunger there is out there. And if it's your first time as a storyteller, get a feel for it before you commit to a much longer campaign. Next, what about venue? Where are you going to play? A few things to think about there is it accessible? Can people get there? Certainly, a venue in the centre of a town is easier to get to than somewhere on the outside of town. I'm in the UK, pub function rooms tend to be quite common, quite popular. But there's other places we've played in, church halls, school hall, all sorts of different places. But can you get a venue? Now, the venue is really important. So a couple of things to think about is, can you dress it? Can you make it feel a bit different? Can you put props up? Can you adjust the lighting? I've been in a venue once where one storyteller pushed his envelope and had 140 lit candles. Awesome experience, but not every venue is going to let you do that. Been in other venues which would kind of turned into almost a nightclub feel with dry ice machines and lights. We once even hired our Laser Quest site as a big ball event, and turned that into like a sort of nightclub feel as well. The other thing about the venue, it's got to be safe. You could be accessible for your players. And safe, running around a ruined castle in the middle of the night. It might sound like fun, but is a trip and fall hazards. And does the owner know what you're doing there? If you are hiring a pub function room, for example, and you've said, we like a murder mystery event, you're going to get players coming up to the bar staff and saying, the vampire's in. And that might freak somebody out if they don't know exactly what's going on. So have a think about the venue, and I think almost getting the right venue is kind of really important. Get a feel for the game. Have a think about how your city's going to work. And Mind's Eye Theatre isn't tabletop. It sounds dead obvious. But maybe your storyteller's had a lot of experience running tabletop games. Well, Mind's Eye Theatre is a lot different in that you've got to trust. You've got to give as much agency to your players as possible. I mentioned this. I've been doing a series of questionnaires with people I've known who've done live role playing with me in the past before. One of the things I always say is they want storytellers to give them as much agency as possible. It should feel like their city. Certainly, when I've done tabletop games, I've populated a city with my NPCs. Being the Primogen, being the Prince, and it's easy to duke in and out of those characters. Ideally, in your live game, all of that needs to be player agency. So have a think about your city, how it's going to run, how you're going to break it down. I've got another video planned, which is breaking down your city for live role playing and making it work. What to do in downtimes, that sort of stuff. Next thing is, have a session 0 with your players. So you're going to create this city, you're going to create this game from nowhere, but every city has a background. And as much of that as you can put in the players' hands as possible, you can. Now, we recently had, I say recently, a few years ago now, we ran a Game of Thrones live action game. And one of the things we did was like a session 0 where everybody who was interested in the game came along. And we might have had about 30 people who were interested in the game come along to that session 0. Might have ended up with about 20 of them playing. And that was so we could create characters, create ties, create backgrounds, tie their people into the game. Imagine the power of that for your vampire game before you jump in. Then you don't have to start a plot of the prince is dead, nobody knows anybody, what's going to happen, or there's no vampires in the city, you're all moving into takeover. Actually, no, you can create a living, breathing city with your players and give them as much agency and control as they like, and get them to explore their relationships and create it in advance. The other thing to think about that with session 0 is think about the kind of style sheet. Now, if you've got a tabletop group, session 0 is great because it's going to establish what you can talk about with your boundaries and stuff. So you kind of got to think a bit about that because you're going to be dealing with a load of different people. Now, as much as possible, respect those people's boundaries and red lines. Of course, if the red line is totally and going to totally derail a game, you might want to think about, is that player best for you? Example, and it's an extreme example, I know. If a player doesn't want to talk about blood or the idea of bloodshed makes them feel really queasy and they can't play in a game, you might be able to deal with that in terms of a tabletop. However, in a live role-playing game, if you've got 20, 30, 40 players, you cannot cut that out just for that one person because it's so integral to the plot. Themes of vampire, obviously. But in a tabletop with your handful of your very close friends, you might be able to. So have a think about that. So you need to create like a style sheet for people coming in who might have missed that session 0. They need to know what you're about, what sort of themes you're going to cover, what sort of themes you won't cover, what sort of stuff is acceptable to talk about. You're going to have a whole load of different people. Some of them might be shock jocks, some of them might not be, etc. So if somebody is going to play a character who's a bit of a shock jock, then them knowing the boundaries that they can push up to means that they'll stay on the right side of where you want it and still remain in character, rather than push over some lines that they didn't know existed and then kind of create weirdness. And that's the thing about being a storyteller, is be as prepared as you can. Set things up in advance so you can deal with so you don't let the unexpected derail it as much as possible because you've kind of planned it. Or if somebody does cross that line, you know what that line looks like. And with that as well, vet your players. It's okay. I make a big thing of games need new players. But games in any organisation doesn't need new people at the expense of ruining what you've already got, or people who are going to be toxic to the game. If somebody's a problem to your game, get rid. Simple as. If you and most of your players are rubbing along fine and one person is that toxic person that's causing all sorts of problems and there's a major groundswell, just get rid. Nobody owes anybody anything. It's easier to do in the troop style than the organisation style, but vet your players. Because you're going to be playing adult games with them, so it's only right that you should play with adults and not people who create all sorts of drama and stuff. And as a storyteller as well, it's okay to say no. Your players are going to want to do all sorts of crazy, weird and wacky things. Have a think about what clans you want in the city. Now, when you're starting a game and you've got, say, 10 players, 12 players, if everybody wants to do a different clan, and you let everybody play whatever clan or bloodline they want, it's going to be harder to get into clan stuff going on because everybody's a different clan. Kind of cut down the clans to begin with and say you've got 3 Ventru, 3 Toreador, 2 Tremere. Straight away you can have some inter-clan stuff happening. It becomes a bit more interesting to deal with. Got another video which is got planned, which kind of radical ideas you could do as a storyteller to improve your game, which talks a bit more in depth like this. If you don't want a particular player to play a particular clan, just say no. Or powers or anything, just say no. I've got a video coming up, top tips for storytellers, we'll delve into that in a bit more detail. And my final piece of advice as a new fledgling storyteller is be consistent. Be consistent in your start times, be consistent in your response to players, be consistent with your rules calls, be consistent with being fair to all your players. Nothing turns players off. And again, this is coming back to those questionnaires. There's storytellers who play favourites and storytellers that encourage cliqueiness in games. As long as you're dealing with all of that, then you should be good to go as a storyteller. And a lot of that can actually be tied together in a document. Maybe it's a player's code that you get players to sign. Have a think about the rules. And actually, session 0, what would be really powerful is get the players to sort of agree a set of players' codes. You have an idea of what you want to go in, and you can kind of develop it like that. So that's a few thoughts, and obviously a lot of those you can delve into in more detail, and as I've said, I will do in some other videos. So if you like what you heard, subscribe. If you've got some opinions on what I've said, leave a comment. Let's have a chat. Let's have a talk. What's your top tips for setting up a game? It'd be great if we have a renaissance of Vampire Live roleplaying. It'd be cool. Certainly it's something I've had a lot of joy with over the years, and I'd like to see other people have joy with it as well. But anyway, that's goodbye for now, and I look forward to chatting to you in another video. Bye.